All right, Stupids versus the spread, week one. Mike is not going to be joining us. He is on vacation, so he'll be back for next week's review. But I do have his picks, so that'll be great. Um, to one other note, we did an SEC roundup, and I know there's not a lot of fans yet, so maybe you're not like super looking for it, but we did an SEC roundup. It got corrupted, the file, and we didn't have time to reshoot it. So the big takeaway is that Georgia and Alabama are going to be really good. I don't see value in either of them on a future just because they battle it out in the SEC championship game all the time. And even if Alabama's the best team, Georgia might come out with a win that game. That's happened more than once in the SEC on both sides of the ball. Maybe A&M sprinkling if you really believe in them, but let's dive into week zero reactions. So I had two. I'm going to get to Scott Frost, but my biggest takeaway from week zero: Hawaii football really not good. They might be one of the worst teams in college football this year among the G5. They had 28 for 55 attempts on passing, only 250 yards, no touchdowns, less than 130 rushing yards. They gave up 35 points in the third quarter. They gave up over 400 rushing yards, over 5 rush touchdowns. Anyone with the video of this game, which is the disadvantage in playing week zero, is going to probably continue to expose them. If you weren't following, and I didn't really pick up on this, and I wish I had sooner, because I did take Hawaii last week +9, and that obviously did not turn out well. But the team was like riddled with issues in the offseason to the point where like the Hawaii State Senate called in a bunch of people. Basically, it was like an issue of the culture of the team. So the new coach is Tommy Chang. He is a alumnus of both Hawaii, the university, and the football program. So he's trying to rebuild the culture there, but there were so many off-season transfers that Hawaii is probably a good fade. And I'll get into that a little later. But Hawaii is probably a good fade for the rest of the year, especially this early on, kind of figuring out, hey, they're probably not to the standard of most of the programs that they're going to be facing. My other takeaway is Scott Frost and Nebraska. Um, Not good. Really, really not good. So once again, Nebraska fell to a team in a less than one score game. Scott Frost lost 28-31 as 13-point favorites or 12 and a half, something like that. Either way, Frost as a coach is 1-9, I think, over the past 10 games in one score games, which is continuously bad. The special teams unit there continues to be a huge issue from last year at Illinois, where they, had a punt return somehow turn into a safety, miss PATs. Now this year with that onside kick, which we'll get into in a little bit. Again, this is going to be a down and dirty episode, so nothing crazy. But after that onside kick, where they were ahead by 2 scores and they still onside kicked the ball, they were outscored 14-0, which is just atrocious. Just not smart football. The final 16 passes of Nebraska, they went 6 for 16 with 2 interceptions. Again, terrible. Look, it could turn out that Northwestern is much better than people think. They won the game. Nebraska certainly didn't lose the game. That's not what I'm trying to say here. Nebraska won the Big Ten West 2 times in the past 8 or 6 years, 2018 and 2020, right? So they're not a terrible team. And the line could have been a little skewed because the last matchup they had, Nebraska won handedly. Northwestern played well. Two passing TDs, 2 rushing TDs, 200 yards on the ground, 300 in the air. They won the turnover battle. But again, the big takeaway is that like some of the coaching decisions from Nebraska are terrible and have been terrible. And I don't know that Scott Frost is going to keep his job this year for its entirety, which is crazy because obviously you can't fire this guy after week 0 because you kept him through the whole offseason. I mean, you'd be decimating your program from this year. You'd lose a lot of people probably to the transfer portal because no one wants to be part of a new coach's year 1 and a rebuilding process. So really, Nebraska's in a tough spot. And then, so my third takeaway, it's not really a takeaway, it's more of a preview for this week. But if you haven't been paying attention to Michigan, they're supposed to be pretty good this year, but they're doing something with the quarterback situation, which I don't like. So they're splitting starts for the first 2 weeks as like a who can perform better. Cade McNamara, who was last year's starter, brought the team to a 12-2 season. 2,500 yards, 15 touchdowns, 6 interceptions last year, 64% completion attempt. Not bad as a senior. He's a senior now. And then J.J. McCarthy, who really didn't play many snaps last year, but he's now a sophomore, was a 5-star recruit. Saw a little time last year, but apparently he's performed really well in camp leading up to the season. So what they're doing is week 1, Cade is going to start, and then week 2, the sophomore McCarthy is going to start, and then they're going to pick essentially after that who is playing. And I just don't like that. I think it takes away confidence from either guy, especially if you're Cade and you're a senior. You brought the team to a 12-2 record last year. A victory over Ohio State, which hadn't happened for Michigan in a while. It doesn't make sense to me to play McCarthy unless he's like actually better. And if you don't know by now, you really got to go with the senior. And that's my opinion. I'm sure Harbaugh knows what he's doing. But so McNamara will start week 1. McCarthy will start week 2 against Hawaii, which we just discussed has a terrible rush defense. But I don't like the two QB situation. There's one ball, you got to give it to the guy who has the most experience. And if they're both playing the same, you give it to the guy with the most experience, and that's Cade. My opinion, who knows? Interested to see how week 2 turns out for Michigan. And then finally, you'll notice this in a couple games this week, so just keep an eye on it. But they're going to tell you it's at a neutral site this game. I think this applies to Georgia and LSU specifically. And they're not. LSU is playing in New Orleans, an hour away from Tiger Stadium, and Georgia is playing in Athens. Or, correction, Georgia is playing in Atlanta. So 2 hometown areas for these 2 teams. I don't really think it's affected the line. I just hate that they're calling it neutral site when it's in their state for 2 SEC programs that are going to have people show up for those games. But let's dive into the games. So we're going to do a preview of the games this week. Just kind of an overarching what I think are going to be the best games of the week. We'll start on Thursday. So Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern, we have West Virginia at Pitt. Pitt is -7.5. Over under is now 51. It opened at 54. So there's a lot of money on the under. West Virginia is not a bad team. There's a lot of hate between these 2 teams, which is cool. I like that, college football kind of has that hate. You have hate week or rivalry week, if you will, where the teams play each other the last week of the season. But you also have games like this where Pitt and West Virginia do not like each other. West Virginia, not a bad team, but Pitt, obviously, there's a lot of people who are high on Pitt this year. I think the line is here and there. It's hard to bet on week 1 without being very confident in a line. I lean the under, but I won't take it just because it fell from 54 to 51. I think both teams are going to run the ball pretty well in this game, so I'd be surprised if we saw more than like 55 points. And they do hate each other, so I think there's going to be a lot of smash mouth defense, kind of run the ball down their throat kind of thing on both sides. But we'll see. But it should be a great game. Definitely a rivalry. Definitely something to watch on Thursday. You also have Penn State at Purdue. Penn State's -3.5. The over-under is 54. Penn State didn't have a great year last year compared to what we thought they would have. They definitely stumbled against teams they should have beaten. There's a bunch of people who are high on Penn State this year, but Purdue isn't the worst team either. I mean, this is a small line for a college football opener. I think this will be probably the game to watch on Thursday, maybe switch between this and the West Virginia game. But there's just a lot of unknowns with Penn State, whether they can bounce back. Aidan O'Connell is back under center for Purdue, so there's a lot of experience there. If you're looking to bet this game, the money, the percentage of money is on the Boilermakers, and the percentage of picks are on Penn State. So it's kind of like a dichotomy of the sharps are on Purdue and the public is on Penn State. Sean Clifford's back under center for Penn State, so even after an injury-riddled second half of last season, he should also be pretty well performing. I think it'll be a fun matchup. I don't have a lean either way, but if you're looking to bet it and you have to bet it, I'd probably just take the points with Purdue at home. It's just a kind of a guess. I don't really have any analysis for this one, but it should be a fun matchup to watch. I'm going to be watching it either way. And then finally, for the Thursday games, Louisiana Tech at Missouri. Missouri's coming off a 6-7 season, while LA Tech is coming off a 3-9 season. I don't think LA Tech has made significant enough improvement to really justify why they would not lose to Missouri by at least 3 touchdowns. It's the classic, Power 5 or SEC team against a down Group of 5 team that has not performed well. So I don't see LA Tech stay in this game. I definitely lean Missouri minus 19.5. The over-under is 59. I don't really have a play there. You should be aware, though, that the public is very much on Missouri, and the money, for some reason, is definitely on LA Tech. There's a huge dichotomy, like 80-20 both ways, of the percentage of bets being on Missouri, but the percentage of money being on LA Tech, which means the sharps are on LA Tech. So just keep that in mind. Moving on to Friday, Temple at Duke. Not two powerhouse teams by any means, but it's two bad teams playing each other with a smaller line. Temple's +7, over-under's 51.5. What's interesting about this game is Temple hasn't won since October 2nd of last year, and Duke hasn't won since September 25th of last year. So these are two teams starved for a win. So this might be kind of a nail biter. Again, probably not great football, but should be fun. Duke's line at -7. I don't know why that is. I think they're both pretty bad programs. But, Temple's last 5 games, they scored 14, 10, 8, 3, and 7 points. That's not good. And they're really struggling. Duke, on the other hand, not much better. They scored 29 against Pitt last year. It's still lost, but I kind of lean the under 51.5. This just seems like two teams that just can't get it going on offense, and I don't know that they have really recovered since the beginning of last year. But we'll see. It should be a interesting game either way. That's really the only marquee game for the earlier Friday slate, and then we go rolling into 10 p.m. Eastern on Friday. TCU at Colorado. TCU's minus 13.5. I think the line has already jumped to 14, and the over-under is 55.5. It's a home-and-home series this year and next for these two teams. The line jumped originally when the line was put out. It was TCU -7, and so much money has been put on TCU that it jumped by 7 points tonight to -14. Sonny Dykes is taking over for TCU after his resignation last year. If you don't know, TCU only went 5-7 after, which is a disappointing year for them. And then they were 2-9 against the spread, 2-9-1 technically. So you're kind of at a disadvantage if you're betting TCU and you don't already have the money on them prior to it jumping from 7 to 14. I don't think Colorado is going to score too much. TCU's defense pretty good. Colorado scored an average of 23 points for their last 5 games in the previous season. I don't like that Colorado has not announced their starting quarterback. I think it's going to be TJ Stroud, who's the Tennessee transfer. But Brandon Lewis, who's their sophomore and played last year, is still apparently in the mix. I think TJ Stroud really gives Colorado a chance to cover. But I kind of lean the over on this one. I think if TCU can get the ball rolling and Colorado can kind of at least keep a little bit of a pace, I think you could see probably like a 31 to like 28 score. I think this will be closer than 14 points. I don't think Colorado's an awful team. I don't think they're a great team either. But if TJ Stroud, who's got experience in the SEC, can get behind there and really make some plays, I think Colorado might keep it close enough. North Carolina, NC State at East Carolina. This is our Saturday slate. So this is noon Saturday. This is a great matchup. These are another two teams that absolutely hate each other. People are high on NC State this year, and I know there's a few that I think I've heard think that East Carolina could actually beat them outright this year. The line opened at 55. It's still over under is 55, and the spread is minus 11.5. There's a lot of bets and money on NC State, so the line jumped from 10.5 to 11.5. But both teams, had a good head of steam coming into the last part of the season last year. Both won 5 of 4. Both had their bowl games canceled due to COVID, unfortunately. And now they're set to meet at East Carolina in the Week 1 opener. A lot of people think NC State could even make a run at the playoffs. It starts here if they're going to, obviously. They'd have to be nearly undefeated, and I don't think that they're going to do that personally, but who knows? East Carolina hates NC State. That's the fun part. So this is another hate game. They got a returning veteran quarterback and a positive outlook from last year. I think East Carolina probably keeps it within the number, and I'm in the minority there. But I'd lean ECU within 10.5. It's not a wager. I'm not going to bet on it, but I think they have the necessary ingredients to perform well. They're at home on a home opener on a noon Saturday game, and they don't like the team they're playing. I think it's that simple. I think they can keep it within about 10. Moving on, UTEP at Oklahoma. Not too much here, but it's the 3:30 Saturday game. One of them that you might want to watch. OU's minus 31.5. So no one expects this game to be close. The over-under is 57. But I included it on the watch list this week because, Oklahoma, there's a lot of unknowns there as far as whether they're a top-tier team that's playoff capable or whether they're just below that level and they're not going to really be in playoff contention. UTEP already has one loss from week 0, so I don't think their home opener, Oklahoma, is really going to struggle. I don't really lean either way, but I don't know that UTEP's going to score more than 14 points if OU's defense really kicks in at home. So I would look at UTEP team total, probably under 14.5 if you can find it. If the line on the over-under from 57 moves up to the 59-60 area, it's kind of already budging up. I might lean the under, but again, no significant plays on that game. A good game for the 3:30 slate. Excuse me. Houston at UTSA. So Houston's minus 4.5, over under 62. I think this will be probably the best game to watch in the 3:30 slate this coming week. For the uninformed, Houston is slated to be a really good AAC team this year. If there is a G5 team to make the college football playoffs, it's probably going to be Houston, but I don't think that's going to happen this year. 2021, Houston won 4 of their last 5. They only lost to Cincy and one other team last year. Cincy obviously made the college football playoffs, as we probably remember. Clayton Tune's returning for a 5th year as quarterback. So Houston really has a lot of hope for this year, and I don't think that's necessarily misplaced. I think they're going to be pretty damn good. So, and on the other side of the ball, Sincere McCormick, who's now a rookie on the Raiders, was lost by the UTSA offense. So, he was a pretty prolific running back. Last year he had 1,500 yards and 300 carries, so pretty good. And it's going to be up to a new running back to make up for that. I don't see UTSA doing that this year, and so I'm leaning, and we'll get to this, but I am betting Houston minus 4.5. Cincy at Arkansas. Arkansas is -6. Over-under is 52. They play at 3:30. This is going to be another great game. Last year, Razorbacks ranked 19th in the nation, or they currently ranked 19 in the nation. They were off a 9-3 season last year. Started strong, lost to a few pretty great SEC teams, and they're looking to repeat their success this year. I think a lot of people are thinking that they're going to fall a little bit from last year. I don't inherently agree with that. Arkansas has a returning quarterback in KJ Jefferson. Sam Pittman's a hell of a football coach. They're missing their number one wide receiver from last year, who had 1,100 yards and 11 TDs. So I think they're going to look to establish more of a run game, or it's very possible they find someone to fill that role. On the flip side, since he's coming off the best year they've ever had, obviously making the college football playoffs, they're still a good team, but I think both teams are expected to regress this year. Again, I don't necessarily agree with that for Arkansas, although I've heard it very much so from a lot of other college football analysts. So this is one of those we'll see games. I don't really have a bet for this. I kind of lean Arkansas -6 just because the line fell from 7. I think a good SEC team like Arkansas can win by a touchdown against Cincy. We'll see, but that's what I lean. I lean Arkansas -6. Another 3:30 game, maybe not as good as we think it's going to be. Georgia, Oregon. So Oregon at Georgia. Georgia's -17.5. Over-under's 53. I will say I lean the over here. But Georgia defending national champs, obviously. Oregon coming off a strong year at 10-4. But people think Oregon's going to regress. Obviously, I think Georgia's going to regress. I don't think they're going to be the national champions this year. But if that's really a regression or just not repeating, that's up for debate. This is one of those neutral site ones that we were talking about. It's in Atlanta, in Georgia, so not really neutral. So definitely expect a home crowd feel, although I think the odds makers put that into consideration. I think Georgia's still going to have a good defense, although not the platinum tier that they had last year. I think they lost something like 8 or 9 starters from last year. Oregon's outlook probably a little worse. Mario Cristobal went to Miami. They haven't named a starting quarterback. Oregon last year struggled with teams of a similar caliber. You look at OU and Utah that they lost to. I think their only strong win last year was Ohio State. So I lean the over. I lean Georgia -17.5. But it's pretty early season, so I'm not betting this game, but it should be a good matchup to see if we're wrong about either of these teams. If Georgia comes out and smacks Oregon by 35, 40 points, you might start to reconsider whether Georgia's a national contender. Another midday slot is BYU at South Florida. BYU is -12. Over-under is 58.5. BYU is ranked 25. And what's interesting is BYU has 80-some% of their production returning from last year. Same with South Florida. So these are two teams that didn't lose a lot in the offseason as far as guys graduating. Given the number of starters returning, I think a rematch is similar. So what I mean by that is last year BYU was favored by 24 points, and this year they're only favored by 12. But if 85% from both teams are returning, then what is the difference there? Because BYU did win. What they're saying is that the Gary Bohan, the Baylor transfer for South Florida, maybe makes a difference in that. But is he worth 12 points? I don't think so. So I'm going to get to this later. But BYU -12 is my pick in their away opener. Last year's game went 27-35 in BYU's favor, so you're kind of there already. I think they pull away with it towards the end. I don't really have a lean or a pick for the total, but I like BYU this year, and I like BYU for this game. Troy at Ole Miss. Ole Miss is minus 21.5. This is kind of more of a betting watch than anything. Over-under is 58. So Ole Miss opens up at home against Troy. Troy's a bad team, and the line is only 21.5. This is a classic SEC team versus team that shouldn't be there. So what I'm watching is the line went from minus 23.5 to minus 21.5 because people are betting on Troy. I don't know why, because Troy is not good. So I'm waiting for the line to continue to drop. If you can get it at 21 or 20.5, I'm taking Ole Miss. But it hasn't done that yet, so it's just a watch, but should be a fun game. This is a weird one. People are going to criticize this, but UMass at Tulane is at 7 p.m. Eastern. It's not a marquee game by any means. It's two pretty bad teams from last year, but I put it on the list because Tulane's offense can be really explosive, and UMass is one of the worst football programs in the nation right now. So I lean Tulane. Again, this is one of those watch for the line to drop kind of things. If you can get it at 27.5 and it opened to 28.5, you can get it at 27.5 or better. I think Tulane just pulls ahead. They have a pretty good coach, pretty explosive offense so they were 2-10 last year, but if you remember the season opener against OU, they gave them a run for their money in overtime. So the capability to be really good and destroy good teams is there, or overcome good teams is there, and I think they kind of put UMass away, but just something to watch. Utah at Florida, 7 p.m. Eastern, probably the game of the mid-evening slate. Utah's the fourth best team in the nation, in my opinion. Not everybody's, but mine. I expect them to beat the Gators handedly this week. I'm taking Utah money line minus 155. The line moved from minus 1.5 to minus 3, which is why I'm not taking the spread. So obviously there's a lot of money and a lot of sharps on Utah. I know it's the Swamp and Utah's away. I just don't think the Gators are anything other than above average or average, really. And I think Utah is far and away the better team. I think they can make a run at the playoffs. I've said that before. But I have Utah in this game, but should be a great game. Next one to watch, and I'll talk about this in the trends, but Army at Coastal Carolina. Army's plus 2.5. I'll give you my bet later. But Army runs the triple option, over under 53.5. It should be a fun game to watch. Close spread, 7 p.m. Should be a good game, and Army is not a terrible team. Army is a fun team to watch, and Coastal Carolina can, impress some people too. All right, moving on. Notre Dame at Ohio State University. Ohio State's minus 17.5. Over under is 58. This is going to be the best game of the night if it's close, and I don't think it'll be close. I think Notre Dame is lacking on offense and defense, both sides of the ball. I don't think this is their year by any means, and I certainly am very, very high on Ohio State. 17.5 is a little high for me. I'd like to see it at like 16.5, just so you get the 2 touchdowns and a field goal win, or at least a push for 2 touchdowns and a field goal. But I think OSU is far and away the second best team in the nation. I think they're going to prove it against Notre Dame, and I think you should watch this game because you're going to see it. The line shifted from 14.5 to 17.5, so there's a lot of sharps that feel the same as I do, but should be a fun watch. Utah at Alabama, not much to say about this other than Utah did have one win in week 0, but this is the classic. Alabama's going to steamroll everybody, and you should keep an eye on them for gambling reasons. 7:30 Eastern, over under 63. I'm not touching that, but Alabama's minus 41.5, and we'll get to that later. But Alabama far and away the best team in the nation. I'm also going to look at the Utah team total under. If it's in the 14.5 point range, I'm probably going to take that under as well. Boise State at Oregon State. Oregon's minus 3.5. Over under is 57. It's at 10 p.m. Eastern, so this is a great nightcap game. These two teams don't like each other either. They're pretty evenly matched up, and so this is going to be and we'll talk about it later, but I have a play on this for Boise. But Boise, has a great quarterback in Hank Bachmeier. I'm going to butcher that. He threw 252 for 400 attempts last year, 63%, over 3,000 yards, 3-1, 2-1 TD INT ratio last year. And then they have a running back by committee, which I like because it allows you to constantly swap in a guy who's got energy. I will talk about this later, but I don't know why Oregon is favored, but we'll get into that. And then last 3 games to talk about real quick. Western Kentucky at Hawaii. Hawaii's bad. This is not something to watch, but Western Kentucky's minus 16, over under 67.5. I am looking at Western Kentucky and betting on them. I think you fade Hawaii this year. I'm going to talk about that in a second. But something to watch for a midnight game if you want something to bet on. We moved to Sunday because there's no NFL football this week. Florida State at LSU. This is going to be a great game. LSU's minus 3, over under is 51.5. Brian Kelly's era at LSU has begun, and this is one of those neutral site ones where Florida is going to New Orleans and playing LSU in New Orleans. It's a home game for LSU. I think the Noles are good. I don't know why LSU is only minus 3. I thought they were a good team last year that underperformed because of the news around LSU's team last year. There was a lot of off-field, as you probably remember, shenanigans or accusations of shenanigans from Edo that I didn't like. Like, I didn't believe them, kind of thing. None of them were that bad enough to garner that much media attention, but I think that distracted the team a little bit, and I think Brian Kelly has a good crew. So I'm higher than most on LSU this year. Not high enough to think they're going to be in the college football playoffs, but I think they could get 8 or 9 wins this year. I don't think that's out of the question. And then finally, Clemson at Georgia Tech, Monday, 7 p.m. Monday night game. Clemson's probably going to mop the floor with Georgia Tech, but something to watch on a Monday night. Okay, so I want us to watch a few trends. So that's the overarching list of games that I think will be good this week. Again, kind of a down and dirty because Mike's not here. Now, I want us to look at 4 trends for gambling this year. First, I am fading Hawaii. I'm fading them every week. Every week, I'm betting against Hawaii. I think they're a bad team. I think they're not good. I think they're awful. I think 4.5 wins was their team total for the season. I don't think they're going to get 3 of those. I like Hawaii. I love the program. They're just not good this year. It's not a shot at them. They had a lot of off-field shenanigans. It's just tough for a program to overcome that. So I'm fading Hawaii all year until they prove to me that they can bounce back from adversity. Really not adversity, but they had so many transfers that I don't think you're going to find them covering the spread at any point this year, aside from a few games. But we'll see. The second is my favorite thing to do every week. I've been doing it for years. Take the Army under. Army runs a triple option. So they have the capability to score, but against anyone that knows how to defend against the triple option, they usually defend against it, but not well enough to get Army to consistently turn the ball over. The problem with the triple option is it burns the clock. Army might have 2 passes in a game and still win the game. Like, that's how they play. They play smash mouth football. They don't throw the football. They don't lose the football. They don't give turnovers. The way they win is they run the ball down your throat in the triple option. What that does is that burns a lot of clock. And because it burns a lot of clock, unders routinely hit for Army. So it's a fun thing to bet. Usually it's like a 12 noon game and you're betting the Army under. It's an easy win. I like the Army under every week. This week is no different. Something to watch. In conjunction with that, if you ever see two service academies playing, so Army and Air Force, Navy and Air Force, and then the Army Navy game, take the under. Historically, the service academy unders, when they play each other, hit routinely just because both teams typically run the ball more than they pass. And then the last thing I'm going to watch for trends, Alabama typically covers against non-SEC teams that they play, especially unranked SEC teams, non-SEC teams rather. They're just a great football program. The old adage is you don't make money betting against Alabama. That holds true here. So keep an eye on that. That's why I like them this week. They've been a cover machine before, and I think they can do it again. All right, last segment of the show. So here's Mike's picks. I don't have the notes for all of them, so I'm not going to do them justice on an explanation. But again, this is like a short, granted, 40-minute episode. But here's the plays from Mike this week. Mike has Oklahoma State minus 21 against Central Michigan. He has West Virginia plus 7.5 and a sprinkle on the money line against Pitt. He's lower on Pitt than I am, so he likes West Virginia to cover this. Again, these two teams hate each other. Tennessee minus 35 against Ball State. This is a classic SEC team against a team that shouldn't be playing them. I don't hate that pick. I actually really like it. Tennessee minus 35.5, or correction, minus 35 against Ball State. And then he has Ole Miss minus 22 against Troy. Again, that line has fallen since I've written this write-up. He took that line earlier. But, again, classic SEC team against a team that is not going to be able to perform against them. And then he has a parlay. So for those who don't know, and you wouldn't know because we haven't talked about it yet, but we do a parlay every week where I follow Mike's parlay. It actually made us a pretty decent win percentage in positive units last year and the year before. But so his parlay is Clemson minus 21.5 against Georgia Tech. That line should be like 31.5. It's a crazy, crazy line that they're not favored by more. OU minus 31 against UTEP. Again, a team that's much better than the team they're playing. And then Maryland minus 24 against Buffalo. He likes Maryland a lot. I think Maryland's going to, and we discussed this in our previous kind of preseason discussion, but Maryland is slated to be a lot better than people think. So I like that pick. As far as my picks, I have Houston minus 4.5. Houston is a very good team. We discussed it. I think they're going to come away as one of the better teams in college football and not just the AAC, and definitely probably the best team in the G5. I have BYU minus 12. I have Utah minus 155. I'm taking the Army Coastal under 53.5. Again, we discussed that. Take the Army unders. Take the Army unders. I am betting Ohio State minus 17.5. Again, I think Ohio State is the second best team in the college football playoffs, or in the second best team in college football, and they're going to make the playoffs at number 2. I don't believe in Notre Dame this year. I've kind of been a Notre Dame hater as far as like their performance. They're not a bad program, obviously, but they just underperform to what they claim to have. I have WKU minus 16 against Hawaii. Hawaii is not good. Just facts, straight facts. I have LSU minus 3. I think Florida State's a good team. I don't think they're good enough to compete with LSU. I think LSU wins by probably a touchdown, which is why I'm taking them minus 3. And then my game of the week, I am betting Boise plus 3.5. All right, so here's the thing. I want to just run through this real quick. There's no reason Boise should not be favored in this game. Plus 3 is an insult. So even ESPN's like metrics think that Boise has a 50.2% chance of winning. I don't know where these 3 points are coming from against Boise, but this feels like either this is the biggest sucker bet of the year or I am going crazy, but I'm putting 2 to 3 units on Boise. because I'm simply just that confident that they're going to win. All right. Well, that has been our 40-minute rundown of week 1 of college football, some week 0 reactions. Go ahead, like and subscribe for us. Mike will be on coming back next week, and we will see you next week. And thank God football is back. Have a good day, everybody.